Who can forget Paul Anka? Once upon a time, there was a teenage idol whose voice and songwriting were the stuff of legend. The glitzy career that brought him fame has long since faded from his life. The 84-year-old author who collaborated with legends and penned classics that will last forever is experiencing what many fans would consider tragic. Once upon a time, he was defined by fame, fortune, and fame. However, his story has taken a drastically different turn due to the passage of time, difficulties, and personal conflicts. Those who loved him when he was younger will be saddened and confused by the reality of his current life. Above all else, it is going to surprise you. The impressive career of Paul Anka. The life of Paul Anka begins with the meteoric rise of a teenage singer who became famous around the world and continues through decades of music history. Diana, Anka's breakthrough single released in 1957, catapulted him to stardom at the tender age of 17. One of the most popular songs of all time, written about a girl he admired, became a smash hit with listeners around the world. Anka went from being a little-known adolescent from Ottawa, Canada, to becoming one of the most famous teen idols of his time almost immediately. At a time when youth culture was booming and music was becoming the language of a new era, his sudden fame put him in the spotlight. His innocent charisma and silky voice made Anka the perfect spokesperson for the movement, and his meteoric rise drew comparisons to the cult that subsequently engulfed the Beatles and other pop phenomena. Not only was he a talented singer, but he also came to represent the sentiments, loves, and desires of teenagers to many. Paul Anka really came into his own in the late 50s and 60s, when he demonstrated to the world that he was more than just another fleeting teen idol. He plunged headfirst into songwriting instead of relying on Diana's fame. Some of his most recognizable cultural contributions came during this time. One of these was the Johnny Carson-hosted Tonight Show theme, which would become one of the most iconic TV anthems of all time. Night after night, millions of viewers tuned in to hear Anka's composition, frequently unaware that the young star who had sung Diana was the one behind the melody. The decision by Anka to write the English lyrics for the French song Captivated, which she then transformed into My Way, was perhaps even more consequential during this time. The song was a career-defining moment for Frank Sinatra when he recorded it. With her new lyrics, Anka transformed the song into an anthem for self-discovery, self-acceptance, and perseverance. People of all backgrounds could relate to the profound impact of the words. The fact that it became so associated with Sinatra further demonstrated Anka's exceptional writing talent. His skill as a musician and his ability to elevate even the most legendary artists were both solidified by this accomplishment. In addition to Sinatra, Anka peddled his hit songs to other legendary musicians. Songwriting by Anka helped artists like Tom Jones, who had a strong stage presence and voice, and early rock and roll pioneer Buddy Holly. Not only was the music exceptional in these collaborations, but Anka's versatility as a songwriter allowed him to capture the distinct personalities of each artist he worked with. Producing average pop songs was not all he was doing. His music gave other musicians a platform to stand on their own. That Anka could play so many different instruments and styles so well demonstrated that he was a genuine musician. Paul Anka distinguished himself from many of his peers in 1963 by taking a daring step. Anka was ahead of his time when he bought the rights to his ABC Paramount catalog, when most performers didn't have much say over their recordings or publishing. This action was out of the ordinary. A game changer, indeed. It was a reflection of his drive to ensure his creative legacy and his astute grasp of the music industry. By claiming ownership of his catalog, Anka preserved his creative rights while simultaneously guaranteeing that he would continue to earn royalties from the songs that had launched his career. He solidified his grip on his material and reintroduced his classics to audiences that year when he re-recorded numerous of his earlier hits for RCA Victor. This calculated move showed that Anka could handle the complexities of the entertainment industry, a field notorious for exploiting young talents, like a businessman. Even though the music industry is notorious for its rapid ups and downs, Paul Anka had already established himself as a survivor by the time the 1970s rolled around. But instead of letting up, he reinvented himself and achieved even greater success. His 1974 duet with Linda Ronstadt, You're Having My Baby, became an instant hit. Anka was reintroduced to a younger audience with the commercial success of the song performed with Adia Coates. The song's popularity with listeners could not be denied, despite the fact that its lyrics caused some controversy among critics. It served as a timely reminder that Paul Anka's ability to captivate listeners and create chart-topping music persisted far beyond the time of his initial fame. His flexibility and openness to change were on full display in the duet's success. After that, Anka had more success with Times of Your Life. What makes this song unique is that it was originally a Kodak advertising jingle that Anka recognized as having full-length potential. Its release as a single sparked a strong emotional response. Like few songs before it, its message about savoring life's passing moments resonated deeply with listeners. It was one of Anka's most popular songs of the aughts because of the way it blended melancholy, reflection, and a soothing melody. What started out as a basic commercial concept became a timeless musical masterpiece known for its profound emotional impact and meaningful message. It served as a further reminder of Anka's talent for transforming random ideas into something significant and enduring. Once Paul Anka got back to his Canadian roots in 1975, he made history again. In that same year, he presided over the inaugural broadcast of Canada's most esteemed music awards, the Junos, on television. With his hosting duties taken care of, Anka's importance as a global superstar and a proud Canadian artist who had brought his nation international renown was highlighted. The event benefited from his participation because it increased its credibility and star power. Additionally, the event highlighted his progress since his adolescent years in Ottawa. There was more to hosting the Junos than just making an appearance on television. It was a tribute to his status as an influential person in the development of Canadian music. Witnessing one of their own so prominently represent Canada was a moment of national pride for Canadian fans. It was a chance for Anka to honor his roots and heritage, though. Paul Anka's 1974 song Backlash. With every triumph in the music industry comes the inevitable scrutiny and controversy that follows. Even Paul Anka, whose career lasted for decades and whose songs were beloved by many, was not immune to this fact. His meteoric climb from 1957 teen idol status with Diana to legendary status as a songwriter for Frank Sinatra and Tom Jones established him as one of the most multi-talented musicians of his day. Troubles came with fame, though, and Anka learned the hard way that being popular isn't always easy. Midway through the 1970s, when he was experiencing a success surge, the most significant controversy of his career emerged for him. At that very moment, it became clear how one commercially successful song could spark a cultural debate and alter the public's opinion of an artist. The 1974 single, You're Having My Baby, was a duet between Paul Anka and Adia Coates. As one of the year's most memorable singles, the song quickly rose to the top of Billboard's Hot 100. With his place in music history solidified, Anka was eager to prove he could still captivate a new generation of listeners, and this seemed like the ideal opportunity for his comeback. While highlighting the joy and emotional weight of pregnancy, the song's lyrics were meant to express gratitude and admiration for a woman carrying a child. The song was a heartfelt ode to family and fresh starts, which many of his listeners found celebratory and uplifting. However, the song's meteoric rise to fame was accompanied by an equally rapid downpour of criticism, which eventually eclipsed its financial success. Quick and far-reaching criticism followed You're Having My Baby. Some felt the song was sexist because it portrayed pregnancy as something a woman did for a man rather than as an intimately personal experience for the two of them. Some found the lines, which may have been sincere, to be disrespectful of women's agency and to center the male point of view on what is, in fact, a very personal and physical experience for women. These worries weren't unfounded. As the women's rights movement gained steam in the 1970s, questioning entrenched notions of gender roles, equality, and respect, they mirrored the broader social milieu of that decade. In this context, the song was seen as more than just a love song. It was seen as a support for archaic patriarchal ideals. Those in the feminist movement who were already outspoken in their criticism of the media and pop culture were quick to target Anka's song. Ms. Magazine, a prominent voice for women's rights, had one of the most memorable and harsh responses. A satirical but incisive title that summed up the dissatisfaction activists felt about the portrayal of women in media such as music, television, and advertisements was Paul Anka being named the male chauvinist pig of the year by the magazine. With this much-discussed label, it was crystal clear that You're Having My Baby was more than just a song. It had come to represent all that feminists hated about how popular media portrayed women. Being singled out in this way was a powerful moment for Anka, connecting his work to a larger social conversation. Organized women's rights organizations joined the media in their symbolic criticism. They felt the song devalued pregnant women and their contributions to society, treating them as nothing more than a tool for men. Lyrics, in their view, ignored the woman's agency choices, and life experiences, rather viewing parenthood through the lens of the male partner's emotions. The rising tide of support for women's emancipation, reproductive rights, and domestic and workplace equality ran counter to this viewpoint. After the song came out, there were protests, arguments, and criticism that kept it in the spotlight as both a musical success and a social critique point. Controversy surrounding Paul Anka's 2024 hits. Paul Anka's career in the 80s and 90s demonstrated that staying in the music industry for a long time was doable with a little creativity and determination. His fellow musicians from the 50s and 60s are either completely forgotten or stuck in nostalgia tours. Anka kept his legacy alive despite failing to connect with listeners of a younger generation. His voice and songs remained popular for a long time because he maintained a regular performance schedule. Puppy Love and other of his sweet adolescent ballads made a comeback, bringing back fond memories of his initial fame. A more important factor is the renewed relevance he gained from his posthumous collaborations with Michael Jackson. The ability of Anka's work to connect the classic pop era with contemporary music was demonstrated by these projects. They also demonstrated the utmost regard that he had for one of the most legendary performers in the world. Rather than trying to reassert his former greatness, Anka spent the 80s and 90s solidifying his position as a composer whose impact extended across generations. Although Anka's career was primarily focused on music, her personal life did get some attention every now and then, demonstrating that fame isn't always a bed of roses. This was made abundantly clear in 2008 when reports surfaced about an incident involving his wife at home. He was reportedly struck by an ice cube by his wife during an argument, according to reports. In any other setting, this kind of thing would have been considered unimportant, but the media went crazy over the story. The event was quickly used by tabloids and entertainment publications to illustrate a dramatic case of a celebrity feud. The situation had been exaggerated, and Anka himself clarified that it did not reflect the genuine character of his relationship. He saw it as just another marital quarrel, little in comparison, but his fame caused it to become a headline. The episode showed how even minor conflicts could get magnified in the spotlight of celebrity culture and how challenging it could be for a public figure to have privacy. After a 5-year hiatus, Paul Anka was once again the subject of controversy. This time, one that is intrinsically related to his ambition to share his narrative. He gave readers an intimate glimpse into his life and work in his 2013 autobiography, My Way. With her autobiography, Anka kept the promise of the usual suspects, candid reflections, behind-the-scenes stories, and revelations from the world of entertainment. It shed light on his personal struggles, his experiences with legendary performers, and his climb to fame. However, My Way caused legal issues rather than being universally praised as a personal account of a full life. Harrods' former owner and prominent businessman Muhammad Al-Fayed sued Anka for libel. Al-Fayed asserted that the book's portrayal of him was defamatory. The dangers that artists confront when they put their stories on paper were brought to light by the lawsuit. Those mentioned in the pages may not share the same enthusiasm as fans, who often welcome such works for their honesty and openness. Even speaking one's own truth could have dire repercussions, as Anka learned from the lawsuit. The conflict between individual expression and the public's perception was a recurrent theme throughout Anka's career, and it was brought to the forefront with the release of My Way and the subsequent legal consequences. Like his music, which had equal parts praise and criticism, his autobiography had mixed reactions, serving as both a tribute to his legacy and a cause for contention. Although the lawsuit complicated what was supposed to be a personal milestone, it did not diminish the impact of the book. Fans were able to gain valuable insight into a legendary career through My Way. It served as a form of expression for Anka while also serving as a reminder of the fine line that can exist between being truthful and exposing oneself to legal consequences. Anka continued to find ways to relate his art to current events even as he overcame these obstacles. Anka gave the song My Way a new spin in 2024, a full decade after he had written the English lyrics for Frank Sinatra. In response to continuing arguments over Columbus monuments, he re-released My Way with some changes made specifically for the Chicago Columbus Day Parade. Cultural and political tensions were rising in the United States over Christopher Columbus monuments and festivities. While some saw Columbus as a symbol of adventure and history, others saw him as a symbol of colonization, injustice, and human misery. Anka brought his music into a highly contentious discussion by providing a new rendition of My Way in this setting. A simple re-recording wasn't it. Aside from the music industry, it was a sign of involvement in cultural discussions. Although he was in his twilight years when he took part in the parade, he was still eager to use his platform to add to public discourse with a song that was quite related to his name. Customs problem with Paul Anka in 1982. It was no longer enough to remember Paul Anka as the adolescent sensation who first appeared in 1957 with Diana. By the early 1980s, that was no longer enough. He had worked tirelessly for over 20 years to establish a reputation for himself in the entertainment industry as a consummate performer and songwriter. His classic compositions, such as the English lyrics to My Way by Frank Sinatra and the theme song for Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, had already brought him widespread renown. His place in music history was solidified by his accomplishments. Even a well-known figure like Anka could not avoid controversy, despite all her accomplishments. Not for a new single or tour, but for a customs violation with legal and reputational repercussions, he was the subject of a legal case in 1982. It all started when Anka was accused of a federal misdemeanor for taking his bags out of customs without checking them first. A lack of patience while traveling or an incorrect understanding of procedure might have led to what appeared to be a minor action at first glance. However, the action constituted an obvious breach of customs regulations according to the legal system, and anyone with his degree of fame would be sure to notice even the smallest slip-up. An oversight that a regular traveler might have overlooked became a major scandal when it involved a famous person from around the world. Paul Anka, whose reputation was built on his discipline and professionalism, found himself in a situation that cast him in a new light all of a sudden. As events progressed, Anka resolved to tackle the case directly. His guilty plea indicates that he accepts full responsibility for the charge. Although this was not a particularly serious offense, the court nevertheless imposed a fine and a probationary term to show that the issue was seriously considered. This resolution exemplified the harmony between proportionality and accountability in many respects. The system applied the appropriate penalty to Anka's misdemeanor offense, just as it would to any other individual facing such charges. But the fallout from his public persona meant that his case went well beyond the confines of the legal system. The news might have been shocking for his longtime admirers. Paul Anka was a multi-talented artist whose songs resonated with listeners of all ages. It was unsettling to see his name associated with a crime rather than a musical achievement. His critics used the incident as a chance to cast doubt on his judgment, implying that he may not have been as cautious in his personal life as he was in public. Practically speaking, the punishments of probation and guilty plea were manageable. However, the real price was in the way people saw him. Thanks to the media's attention, the case remained in the news for much longer than the actual court proceedings. Anka's defamation and divorce case from 2010. Paul Anka had already endured decades of extraordinary success and challenges that were widely publicized by the time the new decade rolled around. His life had been anything but ordinary, beginning with his ascent to teenage stardom with Diana in 1957 and continuing through his enduring impact as a performer and composer. Fame, on the other hand, brought both acclaim and notoriety, as well as scrutiny, difficulties, and public disputes. His 2010 divorce from second wife Anna Anka was a very public and emotionally charged time in his life, and it was during this time that one such chapter unfolded. This incident tested his resiliency and reputation in a way that legal controversies based on small procedural errors or professional disputes cannot. The divorce was about more than just a couple's marital problems. Although going through a divorce can be a difficult time for anyone, the situation garnered significant media coverage and public interest due to Paul Anka's celebrity status. A prenuptial agreement and the reasons for the marriage became contentious issues during the proceedings. Anka claims that his ex-wife Anna made claims about him that were hurtful to his reputation and were false, misleading, and damaging, turning a private negotiation into a story with potential consequences for his public image. He claimed that the allegations misrepresented his intentions and the nature of their marital agreement. A defamation lawsuit was filed by Anka as a formal response. Anna Anka's statements about their prenup and the reasons for their marriage were alleged to be false and damaging, according to the lawsuit. There were a number of reasons why the lawsuit was filed. To begin with, it gave him a formal way to defend his reputation and show that he would not stand by while baseless accusations were made. Second, it was a public declaration that elucidated his stance, showing how serious he was about safeguarding his reputation and the veracity of his life story. By taking legal action, Anka showed that he was aware of the possible consequences of public commentary and wanted to lessen the impact of unfounded accusations. For prominent people, the incident demonstrated how their private lives and public personas interact. Divorce is common, but it takes on a whole new level of complexity when either or both spouses are famous. Anka's name was heavily associated with the music industry due to his lengthy career, and any controversy surrounding him had the potential to impact both public opinion and the perception of his professional legacy. Thus, the defamation lawsuit became a means of resolving both his individual grievances and the broader consequences for his public persona. Attempting to keep the storyline of his life under control during a turbulent period was a major motivation. Prenuptial agreements are especially important in high-profile marriages, as the legal action demonstrated. If Anka is to be believed, he painstakingly negotiated a prenuptial agreement to lay out the parameters of his marriage and any possible dissolution of it. He thought it was harmful that people were making assumptions about his character and intentions when they said things that weren't true about the agreement's goals. The defamation suit was a means of redress, with the goals of stating the truth as Anka perceived it and making sure that the public did not engage in hyperbole or speculation, but rather talked about actual facts. The episode shed light on the wider emotional and reputational pressures that come with a public figure's divorce, beyond just the implications for the courtroom. Even seemingly insignificant personal conflicts can quickly gain attention and analysis from the media and society at large when it comes to celebrities, who are not always shielded from public view. This meant that Paul Anka's divorce and the accusations leveled during the proceedings were more than just personal difficulties. There was a chance that these occurrences would shape public opinion of him and his fan base. It follows that the defamation lawsuit is an attempt to manage and safeguard his reputation while it is under intense scrutiny, as well as a legal maneuver. A systematic approach to conflict management was shown by the lawsuit's filing. Anka demonstrated his comprehension of the significance of formal procedures and measured reactions by opting to pursue legal recourse rather than participating in public debates. Responding on the fly in interviews or on social media is a common temptation for public figures. However, Anka opted for a course of action that enabled the issue to be resolved through the legal system. His dedication to a measured and professional resolution was further strengthened by framing the dispute in terms of evidence and facts rather than hearsay or opinion. Additionally, Anka's lifelong pattern of public challenges was mirrored in the 2010 divorce and defamation case. His music controversies and 1982 customs violation were not the first occurrences to garner such notice and investigation. However, the claims and the emotional stakes involved in the divorce and lawsuit were exceptionally personal. This was a disagreement about things like marital trust, personal integrity, and private life, as opposed to things like professional criticism or procedural mistakes. Dealing with it necessitated not just legal acumen, but also emotional fortitude, demonstrating the multifaceted demands of being in the spotlight. Paul Anka's case that drove him mad. Known for hits like My Way and Put Your Head on My Shoulder, the life of the legendary Canadian singer-songwriter Paul Anka has been just as full of adventures as his music career. However, in 2013, a legal storm involving Muhammad Al-Eid, a billionaire of Egyptian-born descent and former owner of Harrods department store, centered on his personal history. Claims made in Anka's autobiography, My Way, led Al-Eid to sue the singer for defamation. Dodi and Princess Diana died in 1997. The 2013 book explores Anka's life, including his relationships with Dodi Fide. A public legal battle ensued, however, because Al-Eid objected to specific passages. Paul Anka and co-author David Dalton were sued by Muhammad Al-Eid in June 2013 in the Los Angeles Superior Court. The claims made in the lawsuit included slander, invasion of privacy, improper use of personal data, and purposeful harm to mental health. Claims regarding the personality and actions of Dodi Fide and Al-Eid's purported role in particular occurrences formed the basis of the lawsuit. The lawsuit asserts that Dodi Fide was depicted in Anka's autobiography as a womanizing daddy's boy who abused cocaine. According to the book, Al-Eid had to intervene to shield his son from accusations of wrongdoing, such as lending Anka hush money. The claim that Dodi and Anka were involved in a customs incident, with Dodi attempting to smuggle cash into the U.S. and U.S. Customs seizing it, was one of the most controversial parts of the book. As each side made their case in court, the media paid close attention to the legal proceedings. The legal team representing Al-Eid contended that the claims made by the book's authors were unfounded and detrimental to their clients' standing in the community. By contrast, Anka's camp maintained that the autobiography was an accurate depiction of the singer's life and relationships. Paul Anka was vindicated in the defamation case that was settled in October 2013. The case ended without additional legal action, but the specifics of the settlement were kept secret. Even after the court case concluded, people were still talking about where autobiography controversy ends and defamation begins. Media coverage of My Way and its contents continued even after the lawsuit was dropped. This case demonstrated the dangers that writers run the risk of legal trouble when they relate anecdotes about other people. The case, according to legal experts, demonstrated how critical it is to be truthful and accurate when writing about actual people, particularly in non-fiction works like memoirs and autobiographies. When public figures like Anka talk about their personal lives, it can get tricky when their stories involve other people's reputations. The case highlighted the fact that words published in a newspaper can have real-life repercussions, even after all these time have passed. When depicting events involving identifiable individuals, especially in high-profile contexts, it is crucial that authors and publishers adhere to factual accuracy.